Hi, everyone. We are just going to give it one more minute until there's still a few people logging on. Okay, so we will get started and welcome everybody. My name is Karen Bell. I'm the Executive Director of Microboards Ontario. And tonight we have a brand new workshop, which I'm very excited to hear more about, and it's the power of relationships. And this one came about because when we've had many families kind of connect with us and say that they are really interested in having a microboard at some point or immediately for their family member, and that they're not sure who to ask because they don't feel that they have people in their life who are close enough to them, or they don't have those relationships and about that makes them feel confident in asking. So we thought we would put this workshop together to kind of give some strategies, some real life experience, and some tools and tips on how to build uh, relationships, both for your family member and for yourself. So to take us through that workshop, I'm very, very pleased to introduce our two presenters tonight. We have Katie Muirhead. She is from the Ontario Caregiver Organization. She's the manager of regional engagement and the regional lead in the western part of the province. And also we have Alice Mainland. Alice is a board director with Microboards Ontario, and her son Michael is in the process of building his microboard, and Michael is very connected in his community. So I'm just going to turn it over to these two women to take us through their workshop.
Thanks, Karen, and everyone for joining. I'm Katie. I'm with the Ontario Caregiver Organization. I'm going to get our slides set up here for you, and as we jump in, and hopefully all things technology work in our favor this evening. All right, so I can't see or hear any of you. We are recording today's session. So what we're gonna hope to do is walk through our presentation today. I welcome any comments or questions to be popped into the chat box during the presentation, if that's okay, and we'll hold any questions for the end unless there's something really pressing that folks want to address. And then someone's going to have to just jump in and interrupt me because I can't see anyone right now as I'm screen sharing. So thanks for that introduction. As mentioned, I work for the OCO, or the Ontario Caregiver Organization, and I'm really excited to join all of you today to introduce you to this topic of care mapping. So as Karen mentioned, this topic really came forward when we were chatting a little bit about microboards and how folks are building relationships and circles of support and preparation for their microboards. And of course, some of those challenges came forward that folks face in building out their networks. So today is really the idea behind our talk today is to introduce you to this tool. It's I approach a lot of my sessions as a take what you want and leave the rest. So hopefully there's something in here that works really well for you. There may be concepts or conversations that we have today that might not resonate directly with you, and that's okay. Everybody's experience providing care is really different. But my hope and goal is that after our talk today, there's something in this that works for you, that inspires you in building those relationships and those connections. As Karen mentioned, Alice is also with us, and she's going to introduce herself more in a little bit and tell you a little bit more about her experience. And she's also going to provide some insights throughout our presentation today. So let's get going. our goal and our objectives for today is really to understand what a care map is. What are some of the benefits of having a care map and how to make one. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you might share that with folks in your network or outside of your network, and share a few resources outside of care mapping that might support you in your caregiving role. Now, as we go into this, I will mention that care mapping is a concept that came out of an organization called Atlas of Care, which is an American group. And then this concept was then utilized through a national organization called Pallium Canada, Compassionate Communities, for those that are familiar with that term. Pallium Canada is a palliative care focused organization. So some of the references in here might be more so for older adults and those sorts of things, but certainly this concept is really relevant to all caregiving, which is why we're bringing it to you all today. So before we dive in, I just want to clarify some of the terminology that we might use or you might read on the screen today. So caregiver is a term that we use at the Ontario Caregiver Organization. And really what we mean, my definition of this, is anyone taking care of somebody else and not getting paid for it. So it might be a family member, it might be a spouse, it might be a best friend, a next door neighbor. Caregiving is certainly something that happens in family dynamics, but it happens outside of that as well, which is why we use this more broad term rather than family member or parent in this case. When we talk about care recipients, or if you see that pop up, it really means the person that's receiving the care. Of course, I think healthcare professionals pretty straightforward. We're talking about anyone providing that paid support or medical support. So that could include your primary care team, hospitals, specialists, PSWs, home care workers, those sorts of folks. And then, of course, your support network refers to anybody around you that's providing emotional or physical support. I will also mention, in a perfect world, in person, this would be a full workshop where folks are working through and building their care maps and getting their hands dirty, so to speak. You're welcome to grab a piece of paper, a pen, pencil, if you're wildly creative, some art materials to draw through and create one as we go. We will talk through and make time to sort of create some ideas around this, but we're not going to spend, a block of time today creating our own care maps, because frankly, it would just be an awkward virtual silence for a period of time. And it's not a really great space to share back. But what I will say is, as we're going through this today, if you get ideas or inspiration, or maybe you have connections to different people in your support network that might be novel or unique, I encourage you to share that in the chat box. And certainly we can include this in part of our conversation after the presentation, because I find sharing across people in individual situations can really inspire some great ideas and strategies to build out your support network. So we know, and again, this data that I'm showing you here is national data from a palliative care perspective. But what the message is here is that the majority of care is provided by caregivers. And when we look at Ontario-based data through OCO, what we know is that 75% of care of your care recipient is done by you, is done by the family caregivers, by those informal caregivers. And so we can see how it makes a lot of sense that a lot of caregivers are talking about feeling overwhelmed and stressed out and really stretched, burnt out in many cases. And so this inspires the question for me of, what if other people started to become involved in that circle of care or that network of care that you have? We would start to see this piece of the pie that we're carrying broken up into smaller pieces and more manageable pieces. So by joining us tonight, you're taking some action to help hopefully change this and move that momentum, which may inspire further work around establishing a microboard, or it might just really enrich the circle of care around your care recipient and, of course, yourself. So you're also going to hear me talking a lot about what are you doing for you, which is sometimes a really hard question to pose and to respond to. But when you see, as we work through what the care map looks like and is, there are also considerations there for you as the caregiver or multiple caregivers. Because sometimes and often we find ourselves really low on the list or not on the list at all. So just before we jump into care mapping, I want to turn it over to Alice to share a little bit more about her experience and her story. And Alice, you just let me know when you want me to move through the slides.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. I'm going to share with you a little bit of history and a little bit about what we're doing as a family to try and basically increase our circle. But first, let me introduce you to our family. My husband, the picture on the left-hand side is my husband and myself with our disabled son who's out riding my old show horse. And quite frankly, he thinks he owns him now, having a grand time. Here's Michael and his brother in the right-hand picture sitting around the fire pit enjoying, we're getting ready for hot dogs with his niece. So family's important to us, and it's as it is to everybody. And our families have different shapes and sizes. So how can they help? The next slide, please. So a little bit more about the family. Our family is Michael is 45 years old now. Yeah, he was born with a degenerative brain disorder. Thank goodness it settled down by the time he got into his mid-teens. But today, our son, we are so fortunate. Our son has such a great life. He lives in community with a roommate. He is supported by Community Living St. Mary's. Great organization to work with because they've got the same vision that we have. Is it's about the individual. It's how do we make one's life better every day. And again, great supportive neighbor, somebody who looks after the needs of both our son and the roommate in the overnight hours. In the past, we've had to advocate for Michael, but now we're in the past, we've done a lot of advocacy work for Michael. One of the things that, I've been fortunate to have people in my life that were great advocates and kind of set the tone for me and allowed me to learn and grow of how do I do this better for my son. And that's kind of where we are today. So not too worried about today, but the problem is what's going to happen when we're gone. I realized this question when all of a sudden my parents passed away and my disabled brother became my responsibility as the oldest girl in the family. And I realized, boy, that's going to happen in our family one day. What am I going to do to help our son? So succession planning is kind of why this is an important thing to us and how we're going to make sure that not only our son, our handicapped son, but our elder son, who his brother, are both well supported, and that our disabled son has that full quality life in community that he has today. Next slide. And by the sorry, I'm just gonna speak to the pictures that were in the other thing. Our son loves doing things in community. So in the pictures you've seen him out golfing and axe throwing. Who knew that someone would enjoy axe throwing as much as he does, but he loves it. Here, in the picture shows our son with the supportive neighbor and their dog. They get along famously, really enjoying some time together. But okay, how do we ensure our vision continues without the burden of falling to our older son? That's what I was talking about. How do we bring people around our son, both of them, to be able to ensure that the burden isn't carried out by somebody who, in fact, the elder brother is a little over an hour away. So when a light bulb burns out in the house which happens to be a home that we currently own, a duplex that we currently own, when a light bulb burns out, that they're not uh, they're not having to get in the car and drive up to Stratford from St. Thomas. So how do we ensure all of the things that mom and dad does today is done not by the burden of another young man who has his own family around, that he needs to care for. So how do we do this? So we looked at establishing a circle or a microboard because we wanted to ensure that we had that community of support built around Michael for when we're gone, but a community of support for his brother, his sibling, for when he's gone. Well, and then the hard one is the hard ask of looking to family, friends, past support workers, people within the community, people that have expressed an interest in the past. Now we've got 45 years of past to pull from, but people who've expressed an interest to be part of Michael's life. And but what are we looking for? What are we asking for? To us, that was important that we knew what was it that we're looking for. Well, I'm looking for somebody to help with finances, making sure ODSP is managed properly, his RDSPs are managed, that the trust that will be in place once mom and dad are gone on permanent vacation. His employment, he currently loves to work at NW. He's the gentleman. If you come to Stratford and you have onion rings, he's the one that's been cutting the onion rings. He cuts the onions, sorry. And well, planning for vacations, anything around finances. So we need somebody to help there. We need somebody to help with fun. We want to make sure that Michael's engaged in sports, that he's enjoying his hobbies like riding a horse or throwing axes or going out on day trips, being able to hang out with friends, helping out. He loves to volunteer. He volunteers at a community food bank, and it is made some great, wonderful contacts there. So all of those things are really important to us. We want to make sure that continues. And then maintaining employment, and the employment, and also making sure that the house which will be in trust is maintained. So that whole property management thing. Michael's health is managed, his well-being, his mental health and physical health, both very, very important. So these are the things that we're building supports in place. And I'll interject every once in a while when Katie's going through something. But the biggest thing that I want to make a comment on is how do we connect with people? And you'd be amazed the number of people we've asked to join us in our journey. Almost everybody has said yes. And we're just so thankful for that. So Katie, I'll hand it back to you as we go along. I'll interject again. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that I had this slide. So here are some of the challenges. And this is what I'm saying is, hey, we need to find people who share our vision as a family and what we're looking for our son and community. Individuals willing to volunteer time to help both Michael and his brother. individuals that can utilize their gifts in what we call property management, finance, and fun police, which means let's have fun, and providing the tools needed to ensure that the circle or the microboard will be successful. Sorry about that, Katie. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you. And thanks for sharing your story a little bit, a very small part of your multi-decade experience. And as Alice mentioned, she's going to pop in and out throughout our talk today to provide some perspective from her experience. And so what you heard is that Alice and her family didn't make a care map. They jumped that step and went straight into a microboard perspective. But I think there's a few things we can learn from Alice's experience and maybe others as well. In that, as we start to build out these networks and start to ask for more support, we start to see an increase in confidence in ourselves and in our role. We're not all born advocates. We're not all born communicators. And I'm pretty sure none of you got a handbook on how to be a caregiver when that day came, or when you realized that that's what you were doing. And sometimes that can create frustration and doubt. And so building out these networks can slowly increase some of that confidence in your role. It also, Alice is going to speak more to this later on, but as the network grows and as those people say yes and say, please, I want to help, that feeling of burden and asking for help starts to relieve itself. And certainly sharing those responsibilities as you build out your network and asking and accepting help from your network really does, like I say, carve out smaller pieces of that pie, making more space and time for you as a caregiver and expanding the person that you're caring for, their network and their social circle. So let's jump into and I apologize, I've started sneezing for some reason. So if I'm sniffling, that's why. Let's talk about what a care map is and why it's helpful. And in order to sort of set the stage, I'm going to show you a really brief video. And this is from Atlas of Care Maps website, and it's just going to really set the stage in terms of a brief introduction to what care mapping is.
Christy and Mike care for Mike's mother, Maria. Maria lives on her own next door, but she has health issues and needs a lot of help. Many others help Maria as well, including Cindy and Julie, her home care aides, Mike's sister Maggie, his brother Steve, sister-in-law Claire, and Maria's many doctors, Dr. Miller, Sandoval, and Ali. This is just a small part of the complicated web of caregiving inside this one family. One of the challenges is just managing all the different people and services involved. It's hard to keep clear of who is doing what and when, understanding who else is involved, and even how their actions impact each other. A care map is a drawing that helps you see your situation clearly, showing who all you care for, who else cares for them, and who cares for or supports you. Having a clear picture allows you to better plan for potential difficulties, better manage the different people involved, more easily identify missing resources and services, and better communicate your situation and needs to your family, friends, and professionals.
So clear as mud, right? Pretty graphics and lovely drawings. I will also say an artistic background is not a prerequisite for this. If you are like me and can't draw to save your life, that's okay. You don't need to be an artist to do this. So let's recap that a little bit. One of those challenges of caring for other people is really coordinating all of the people and services involved. And I'll also acknowledge that, again, this was developed originally for folks supporting people in palliative care. And our networks and the people involved in our individual situations may not be as full as that video was. There were a lot of people involved. And what I hear often out in the community in my work is, I do this by myself. I'm all alone. I don't have help. And that's also part of the conversation we had with Microboards Ontario, is folks coming and saying, I'd love to try this, but I don't have all of these people who can take on these roles. So the goal of this is also to, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, to inspire how to cultivate those relationships and build out that circle of support. So this is really a visual diagram to help you understand and help other people understand who is involved, to what degree, how frequently, where are there gaps in support, and in care. And so the ultimate goals here is to really give you this working document that puts it on paper, strengthen your support network through finding those gaps and seeing where there are great opportunities, and getting yourself organized, so that you can be hopefully sharing some of this work with other people. So this is a simplified version of what a care map might look like. So in this example, and again, we don't have to be artists. For me, when I do this, I use initials and circles, and it is not straight and organized and pretty. But we have the beautiful graphic design here to help you at least read my writing in a digital format. So in this example, we have Shelley and Eric, who are in the house. They're partners. Joan is Shelley's mom. Joan lives with them and is the person requiring care. So Shelley and Eric are the primary caregivers to Joan. And we've got Dr. Rupert, who is Joan's primary care physician. We have friend Claire, who doesn't live in the home. And we've included Dot, the cat, here. And I think it's really important to include pets and animals and people who do the small things, because sometimes the small things make a really big impact. So it's also helpful when we're drawing this out to think about those people who maybe come by once a month and you go sit on the porch and have a coffee with them, and that's a break and there's something meaningful and supportive there for you. Maybe your sister from the East Coast comes out once a year and spends 2 weeks, and you dread it before they come because you have to prepare your home. But then when they get there, they're supportive to you and to the person you care for. So it might be really short-term support, but they're still a part of your support network. And what you'll see, and I'll explain these arrows and things in just a moment, is that different thickness and connection of the arrows all relates to the intensity of care and the relationship dynamics that people have. And if I were to edit this, I would draw little arrows from Dot the cat to all the people in that home as well. Because if you're like me and you have a pet, my dog has changed my life and creates a lot of peace and happiness for me. So shout out to all the pets in folks' homes. So as you're looking at this, I'd like you to start thinking a little bit about what your care map might look like. Maybe you already are, and think about who are those people in the home, outside of the home, who are those formal providers, informal networks and community services, and think about how altogether these people can make a difference in the quality of life for your care recipient, the person you're caring for, and for you as well. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about letting family and friends support you, because this comes up in my work quite often. Usually the question is, I don't know how to ask people for help, or there is quite a bit of emotions related to asking people for help. So people can often feel uncomfortable asking for or even accepting offers of help from family or friends, even though we might know deep down we really need this support. I think about when that diagnosis hits. It might be very early in your life. You might be a parent of a child with a developmental disability, and this has been 25, 30 years or longer for you. Maybe you're providing care to multiple people and somebody knocks on the door and sends well wishes and gives you the flowers and the casseroles and says, let me know how I can help. Or the other famous one is, I don't know how you do this. I hear that all the time from caregivers and in my personal caregiving experience as well, of you're a superhero. How do you do this? And you kind of just go, yeah, I know. And let me know how I can help. And you go, yeah, yeah. And then they don't come back, right? You don't hear from them. And a big part of that is people want to help. As Alice alluded to earlier, she had almost 100% return rate on folks that she reached out to for support, but they don't know what to offer. So it's really personal, right? Your neighbor or your best friend or somebody close to you in your network might say over and over again, just let me know. Just let me know how I can help. I'll drop this off. But they don't want to overwhelm you or invade your personal space, and they're not really sure what to offer. So this is where we can take a leap of faith and a little bit of leadership and sign or ask for that help. And we'll talk a bit more in the next part about wish lists and how we can use that as a tool to do that. And most people do feel better, right? People usually want to help, and they feel empowered and they do feel better, even if it is that once a month connection. They just need a little bit of direction. So it's really important to note that accepting help or asking for help doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not in control of the caregiving or you're not doing a good enough job. That was my experience. I come from clinical background. I'm a behavior therapist of over a decade, working with folks. And my more recent caregiving experience was caring for an adult with mental health and addictions challenges. And he had 3 children, one of which had autism and mental health issues. So I walked into this thinking, I can do this. This is literally what I get paid for. And I never asked for help. I took everything on myself and I burned out very, very quickly. And a big part of why I didn't reach out was I felt a lot of shame and I felt a lot of guilt. And I felt like I agreed to do this. This is the person I love. This is part of my family. I should be able to do this. And I hear this often, especially from parents of kids with various needs. I'm their mom, I'm their dad. It's my brother, it's my sister, it's my parent. I'm going to do this and I'm not going to ask for help. But we know from the data that more and more caregivers are burning out at faster rates. And we need to rely on those informal networks of folks in order to get the increased volume of support that we need. So we can't do it all. And maybe what I'm going to do now is pause and turn it over to Alice and see. Alice, I know when we chatted in preparation for our talk today, you shared some really great examples and stories of how you would approach people when you were seeking additional support and the types of questions you would ask and some of the feedback that they would give. So I'm going to stop and see if you have any thoughts on this.
Okay, great. One of the things, and I'll just expand again, as what I've found is as our children or our disabled youth, in our case, aged, our world got smaller and smaller. And I didn't realize how small our world was getting until I came to a point that I needed some help. And that help was finding day support. Well, I figured, hey, if I know my need for help was going to continue to grow down the road, I better start getting involved in things in the community that were the places that I knew that our son needed to be at or would engage in. So, to me, it was easy for advocacy, but it's not always that easy. And it's hard to get started. So, small world, how do you make it bigger? Well, you make it bigger for us. How we did that was reaching out to people who are in similar circumstances, who are friends of our son from high school. All of those things in community that made his world get bigger again, because that's really what we wanted, looking for people to help grow his world. So we're able to advocate through agencies. But that's great. We've grown the life that we talked about. But as I said, succession planning, we're not going to always be here to do that. So we need to think of long-term younger people who would be involved. So we're fortunate. We've got a fair number of family members, but what did we want them to do? So our wish list was important. We needed people, as we talked about, property management that could help with the house. We're looking for people to help with the finances. So when I approached people, I was approaching them with what I knew they enjoyed doing today already. Michael has a cousin that is well, he's actually a fireman. So the standing joke for firemen is their day job is a firefighter. Their night job is a firefighter. Their day job is reconstructing a building. So that's exactly what he did. Great at construction. And I approached him and said, hey, this is the kind of help that we're looking for. And this is what it might look like. Would you be willing to come on a team? And, we're going to meet every once in a while and talk about these issues. And I'll make sure you get everything you need to and help you all over it. He said, yes, absolutely. He really enjoyed doing that. So we just kept going down the line, looking for the resources that we thought that we'd need in the future. But the big one that we ran into, well, the big issue we're afraid of, would somebody say no? I did have a young man who is going to help with the finances. And he had just given, him and his wife had just given birth to their second child, and life was getting pretty busy for them. He's a real estate agent, and he said no. And I said, well, no, but what if? And I passed him, went by a scenario of down the road, and this is what it might look like, and this might be how you could help. And he says, absolutely. Once you made it a smaller piece, and provided opportunity for growth in the future. So those were some of the things we're able to look at. What are we asking for? Be specific and think of what do you enjoy doing, and can you enjoy doing it with us? So those were some of the ideas that we went through. Katie?
Thanks so much, Alice. And I think you also shared a story, or maybe it was another caregiver I was speaking to, where the person said, not today, but ask me later. Things are really busy right now. So it's a no today, but come back. And then
you're absolutely right. I apologize. I forgot about that story. And again, they had a really full life, and they were more than willing to listen later. So now I got somebody on the waiting list for my son to ask at a later date.
Yeah, which is a great strategy, because we'll talk about this in a moment, how we also have to think about that as people's lives change and circumstances change, having those backup plans for folks. So thanks for that, Alice. I think it's some really great examples of how we can reach out to folks and prepare as best as we can for hopefully a yes, but ways we can also explore the no, and maybe it's a no, not today, but maybe another day. So let's jump into what it means to actually create this care. So I'm going to show you another little video just in explaining how this works and how to build one, and then we'll walk through it more slowly together.
Drawing your own care map is easy. We're going to show you how to do it using information that you already know. So grab a pencil, paper, and an eraser. Using symbols to represent people, first you'll draw the people and pets that live with you. Then you'll add any other people you care for, add other people who are also caring for the people you care for, add those who care for or support you. You will draw arrows to show who cares for whom, using different types of arrows to show how often that caring happens. Finally, you'll add a couple of lines to indicate who lives close by and who lives really far away. Still need help? Get our how-to document to get written step-by-step instructions.
So there are some guides through Atlas of Caregiving that are available to walk through this, and we're happy to share that resource with folks afterwards, along with the recording and the slides that we're sharing today. So you don't need to memorize all of it today. I know we're throwing quite a bit at folks, but there are some tools and guides out there if you want to dive a little bit more deeply into this for you in your situation. So let's look at this in a slower paced way with less beautiful cartoon drawings. So again, we'll use a similar example here. And so I invite folks to, if you have that pen and paper or watercolors and crayons or whatever it is that you have before you, if you're like me, it's a legal pad and a hotel pen. You can start drafting and drawing this out for yourself. But of course, what you're going to really do is start with that primary focus of who's in your space. So maybe you live with your person and maybe you don't. Maybe your person lives in a different setting, and that's great. You're going to represent that on paper. So you're going to start by drawing you, the people in your household, maybe draw, if you're fancy, a little house around it or circle it. And then again, these arrows represent the frequency and I guess volume of care provided. So what we can see from this picture on our screen is that Shelley's providing a large amount of care to Joan, to her mom. But Eric is also providing support on a daily basis, and Claire is also providing support occasionally, and Dr. Rupert is checking in weekly. So those arrows reflect sort of the frequency or the volume of care that's provided. So you'll start in the middle, start with you and where you're at. And again, I encourage you to think about not just the person or the people you care for, which is really hard when this is our life and what we've been doing for as long as we have, but also think about you and what supports you have for yourself. So in this instance, Shelley and Eric are supporting one another. Shelley's getting support from Claire. I would again also draw little arrows between the animals in the house, unless you have animals you don't really like and maybe they're not supportive to you. But I really want you to think holistically here and not just about the care recipient or the people that receive care, but as you, as the caregiver, and what your needs are and your support. So let's do a quick tip summary here. I'll leave this up for a second, and this is just sort of a verbal way instead of a visual way of explaining the quick tips on how to make this for yourself. Again, if we were doing this in person, we would all pause now and draw our care maps and spend a little time, and you'd be able to see each other's maps, and we'd have somebody, if they're willing, share the work that they've done. But for many reasons, mostly virtual and confidentiality, we're not going to dive into it in that way. But again, if you have, maybe you're in a situation where you have some unique supports that are available to you, feel free to put that in the chat box. I think it might inspire other people who might be in the situation of feeling really alone in their caregiving, and that I don't have anybody. And I've been, I think Alice said, it becomes a really small circle as we age, and that support network goes away over time, and we feel more and more like it's just us. And so if we can help to inspire each other and who some of those support folks are in your life, that might spark an idea or a reminder that, oh yeah, I do have that person that's in this for me. So again, you can start by drawing yourself at the center, add anyone you care for, anybody who cares for your person, anyone that supports you. Create those arrows to reflect the frequency or the volume of support you get. Include those healthcare providers, those community service providers. And then, as you saw in the video, you can even go so far as to draw like how far away and how close people are by circling your care map. So the next component, as folks are thinking about this or working away, is to create a wish list. No one's care map is going to be complete. This is a working document. This is a living, breathing document. It changes. Our needs change. Our health, our emotional, social needs change as caregivers. Our care recipients' needs change. The people that support us needs change. And so, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I have a perfect circle of care, which is kind of like the Microboard's goal and vision. So if you're entering into that space and you haven't explored Microboards, please do. But if you're sort of in the early stages and still figuring it out, a wish list is a really great tool to include as part of this. And really the goal is to reflect on, what do you need? What do you want? So there's going to be those really practical things. You know, we need more money, we need more respite, we need more community-based services that are publicly funded. But what else? I want to go on a vacation. I want to do my monthly book club again. I haven't gone to a movie in 7 years. I want to go on a date night with my husband or my partner, right? What are the things that we want? What are our wish lists? And part of why it's really important to create this is it might inspire further thoughts about who's part of our care map that could support that. But when we start talking about sharing this, it might also prompt ideas on who can join your team to support some of those wish list ideas. So, some questions to ask yourself when we're reflecting about all of this and our wish list. So, what would you like to see in your caregiving experience that would bring you more joy? For me, in my caregiving world, it was a very challenging time. I think a lot of it had to do with taking everything on myself. There were other reasons as well. It was a difficult time in general, but I never stopped to think about, what do I need right now? And what have I given up and sacrificed? And who can help me bring back some of that joy in my life to help me continue providing care? We are rechargeable batteries, and our batteries get drained real fast if we aren't rejuvenating and finding those things that give us moments of joy. So what are some of those things? Let's daydream for a second when we think about our wish list. What happens is, as Alice mentioned, what happens if somebody in your circle can't do this anymore? People have children, they move away, they get sick, they go on vacation while we stay home. Maybe there's a relationship dynamic change. There's all kinds of reasons. So can we use this wish list to think about a backup plan? Who is on our care map that's really an essential part of our care team? That's not, and that might be you as the primary caregiver. What happens if you have to go get a hip replacement and you're out for, several weeks or months, right? So let's think about some of those backup plan pieces and what they need in order to be prepared to take on some of those roles. Now, we have some tools at OCO that I'm happy to share in terms of preparing for contingencies or getting yourself organized. And there's other tools and resources out there as well. And also, who are those key professionals and people that might be missing from your map? As caregivers, we don't know what we don't know. 25% of caregivers don't know what they need. Like I said, we were not gifted a handbook with all the magical answers. And so creating that wish list might also inspire, cultivating these new relationships with folks that might be really critical and impactful in a positive way as part of your team. So let's look at the next stage in terms of putting your care map to work. So we certainly want to be sharing this with all of those informal supports, those family members, those friends, those people in our life. I say to some people, like, make this and put it on your fridge. So when people walk in your house, they go, oh, what is that? And you can explain. well, this is our care map. And these are the things that Christian needs, and these are the things that Rob needs, and these are the things that I need, and this is who supports, and these are the things that we hope to get one day, right? So hopefully as those people come in, they go, oh, I'm not on this map. How do I get on this map? Oh, okay. Well, are there anything here that you're interested in? Or maybe there's things that you're interested in that other people are doing, that you can be their backup, or you can trade off and take turns, those sorts of things. So certainly we want to be sharing this with our friends, our family, those informal supports, but we also want to be sharing this with our healthcare teams and our community service providers. And so there's a few things to think about when we go into this phase and stage. So first we want to be able to explain why we did this. A lot of people are going to look at this and go, wow, you made a really pretty picture. Names or arrows, and it doesn't make a lot of sense if you're not familiar with care mapping. But once we explain, how this works and why this is helpful, it helps me identify those gaps in needs. It helps me inspire other areas of support and people to come into my circle of care. It helps me see where I may be not prioritizing myself as a caregiver. We want to be able to explain when we're bringing this to our providers what the purpose of the care map is, and then be prepared with a list of questions. Questions might look like, what gaps do you see? This is my wish list. Is there something that you know of from your organization or other healthcare providers or organizations that can help me with some of these things? We don't know what we don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've encountered caregivers who don't know that there are caregiver tax benefits and credits, that there are how to navigate some of the home care services, and that in certain communities in Ontario, things work this way, but in other communities they work a different way, and they've moved. There are so many things that we just don't know, and we learn along the way. So if we have these prepared questions, or we have our wish list, it might fill some of those gaps when we're talking to these professionals who do this day in and day out. And so bringing this care map with you is also going to help them visually see that 75%, especially if you're a caregiver who is doing most of this on your own, and your care map is not as full as the video or maybe other people. It provides a visual reflection to your primary care physician, other healthcare specialists, community agencies. If you're an 80-year-old walking in with a care map where it's just you and your adult child, that should raise some signals that there are some concerns that you don't have support, and we need to start as a community putting a plan in place to support your family as you continue to age and your child continues to age. So there's a lot of benefits to sharing this. So we don't want this to be this one thing you drew out and then you put in a drawer, added to the pile of paperwork, and never looked at or saw again. This really can act as a visual aid and a tool to inspire a lot of different pieces. And then lastly, before I move to just where there might be some additional resources and places to seek support, again, it's really important to broaden your support network, and not just for your person. Certainly as they're aging or as their health status changes, we want to build that insulated network around them. But for you, I've said it so many times, you're probably rolling your eyes at me at this point and tired of hearing it, but we need to have supports for everybody. If we're not well, they're not well. So we really want to highlight that wish list to increase that support network for anyone. And I really loved Alice's suggestion of starting to expand your network to see what caregiving business you can drum up, right? If you start joining those groups, or you start participating in different initiatives and activities, you find like-minded people, and you find helping, caring, supporting people who might be interested in taking on some of these tasks, leaving you more time to do the things that you want to do for you, but also the things you want to do with your care recipient. We don't want you giving up the fun stuff. If you love going to the mall and walking around with them and doing shopping or listening to music or playing games or doing whatever it is you do, we want you to keep doing that. But we also want to carve out that time for you and your family and other roles and responsibilities. So that gives you a really quick, sort of quick, I realize I've been talking for a while. It gives you a medium quick idea of what a care map is and why I think it's really important and a really cool and different way of documenting and conveying your support network and building that out. So let's look really quickly at where you might be able to find some additional supports. So again, with this being offered through Microboards Ontario, and we're a provincial organization as well, I highlighted just the big ones. When we get into the details of your community and where you live, there are going to be the list will be much longer. So of course, Alice mentioned community living. Many of you might be familiar, or should be familiar with community living at this point. And if their services are going to look similar but different from region to region and community to community. 211 for folks that are not familiar is a phone number you can call to get information on programs and services that are available to you where you're at, where your person is. Maybe your person doesn't live in the same town that you're in or the same region that you're in. So you can call that number and look at your wish list and say, I need to talk to somebody about housing options. Who do I talk to in Bolton? And they'll go, oh, okay, and they'll give you information. Or I'm looking for respite, or I'm looking for day programs or financial supports or different things based on whatever your wish list is. 211 is a really great resource for that. There's also a lot of other community databases based on where you live. Southwestern Ontario has the Healthline. There's different ones in Eastern Ontario. Our organization has a 24/7 helpline you can call anytime of day, get connected to information about our organization, but also what's available in your community. We also have a whole list of free programs and services, from light touch things like a 90-second health newsletter, webinars that are recorded on a whole bunch of different topics, e-learning, all the way to caregiver coaching, where you can work one-on-one with a caregiver coach to maybe help you build a care map or build out your support team or find more balance or answer some questions. So we've got all kinds of programs and services. We have mental health supports and peer support, all sorts of things that are all available for you as the caregiver. And the other one that I'll mention are family support networks that are available across the province. So for folks that are not familiar with family support networks, or FSNs, they are family-driven networks in local communities that often host support, education, events, different activities for families of folks who are supporting somebody with developmental disabilities. So if that's something that you'd like to learn more about, and it's also sorry, I'll interrupt myself there. It's also a really great way to build out those relationships like Alice mentioned. I was chatting with a few different family support networks recently, and they do some really fun stuff. Like they plan trips to sporting events and entertainment events and different things for parents, but also for adult children with developmental disabilities. So find a family support network near you. It sounds like an infomercial. And see what they have to offer, because there might be some really interesting ways to build those relationships and connections through the FSNs. And what I failed to put on this list, but of course, is a great resource, are Microboards Ontario. And I'll let Karen talk a little bit more about how Microboards works and the resources that are available if folks are not familiar and want to learn a little bit more. So just as I wrap up, we'll do a quick, summary. Why this is important, why creating and using a care map is helpful. It increases that understanding of your role, how much you do and how much you can maybe share with others. Hopefully it increases your feelings of being supported. Sometimes we're so busy that we don't see all those working pieces. We might just get frustrated by navigating those working pieces, but seeing it on paper might help you feel supported a little bit better. It enables those conversations that sometimes are hard conversations to have. It's not easy asking for help, but we know that it's really important as caregivers. And hopefully, it will inspire folks to join you and broaden your support network, ultimately improving the life of your care recipient. We want them to be engaging and accessing supports from other people and building their social network, but of course, in also improving your quality of life as a caregiver. So just as I wrap up, I want to acknowledge Atlas of Caregiving for their work, the videos that I shared and the toolkits that I'm happy to share out as well, and Pallium Canada, who helped to adapt this material so that we could present that to you today. And so I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there's any comments or questions, challenges, wonders from folks that joined today. No questions means I was very thorough and Alice and I did our jobs, right? Is that what that means?
Well, others might be thinking about questions. I do want to make a comment. This is kind of my background was in engineering, and my first thought when I seen your care map was what a neat way to put in perspective how one's the all of the nuances that we have in our life and how we might need help and support. And what I see that type of the care map, because I'm going to be doing mine now, is it's going to help all the people who are on Michael's microboard and circle to know who does what and when they're doing it. Like it can really be a helpful tool that way. So thank you very much for that resource.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing your story today. I'm glad that you found it helpful. And, I hope it, like I said at the beginning, it inspires something in all of us, and take what you want from our conversation or our presentation today and apply it where it fits for you.
Are there no questions? I thought it was a great presentation, Katie and Alice. I loved how it was so holistic, like you're looking at all areas of your life and you're talking about all the people who can be involved, and also how important it is to make time for yourself so that you can build those relationships, not just for your family member, but for you as well, and the importance of not um, letting that go. Because as Alice said, the older a child gets, the smaller the world seems to get. And it gets harder. We all know it just gets harder to make new friendships and new relationships as we get older. So to have a tool that allows you to consciously do that, I found, and strategically do that, was really amazing. So thank you.
One thing I might mention as well, that if it fits for your family, another way to approach this is also to include the person you're caring for as you're building your care map. So at OCO, we often encourage caregivers to build these plans and strategies where possible with the person that's receiving the care, so they're a part of that process. So if you're in a scenario where your person does have the cognition or the insight to be able to provide their feedback into who's a part of their care team, and they might say, oh, Sean down the road, I see him every time I go to the basketball court. Okay, well, let's talk to Sean. What do you think you could do with him, and how could he be part of your support team? So I think there's also a level of importance where applicable to include the person that's receiving the care, to build these maps, or at least do it around them so they see, and they might have ideas. They might inspire a thought in you that maybe you hadn't thought about before. I remember at the event, one of the events that Karen and Kira and I were at, we were talking with a family, and they said, oh, my son really loves box racing. and I knew the community that he was at. And I said, okay, well, let's start going to this particular raceway. And maybe you can build some friendships and networks by doing that. He's going to something he really enjoys. But now you're starting to build a community around him, which could also be a community that supports you. And this was a family that really struggled with understanding or finding supports, and they felt really lonely. So it's even taking a step further back and looking at what those common interests are and building those relationships there to then ask those questions, to then add those people to your map.
Karen, you're muted.
I've been talking to myself the whole
Yes.
time. It's late. Great example, Katie. Thank you for doing that. And just, I guess just as we wrap up, one of the things that we do at Microboards Ontario is we do have a lot of families who come and say, I really want to explore this, but I don't have these relationships in my life. And we do have an informal mentorship program. And Alice is actually one of our mentors. And we structured it informally because we know that there's times in people's lives when they just want to reach out to someone else who can give some advice, bend an ear. They might have had a similar experience. And so our mentors are all ad hoc, I guess. So a person, if they want to talk to someone about a microboard or about building a network and they live in St. Thomas, they can go on our website and say, hey, Alice lives there. And they can connect with her directly. They don't even need to go through us. They can just send her an email and that relationship can take its own course. So it was one of the things we thought we could do to just help grow people's networks a little bit more as well. So check that out if you're interested as well. So if we don't have any questions, I just want to say thank you to the two of you. This was a great presentation. It was great information. And it's there is a question in the chat. And how we can be strategic about building out our relationship circle and building out our friendships and making sure that we're doing that for ourselves and prioritizing that as well. People say I don't have time to do that, but it's so important that we do. And just before we go, Maria, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, is there a site or an app where people who want to be on a board advertise their services?
Ooh.
So
Sorry, that was my first reaction is if they want to be on a board, boy, what a great idea. I might suggest though, this is just me personally, is I love it when people are thinking community minded and would like to be on a board. But the boards, there's so many organizations within one's community that they're always looking for directors. So what a great way to learn how to be on a board and then look to see, hey, is there somebody building a microboard that I've got some experience that they could be part of. So just the thought, but Karen, Kira, I don't know, have you heard of such a way?
Not directly, but we can search it out for sure. We do want to make sure that the person gets to know the person who has the microboard as well, because that's a really important component. But yeah, we will follow up on that. It's a good question. Thank you. Anything else before we let you go? All right, then. Once again, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Alice. And Thank you for coming tonight and giving us your time, and thank you everyone for attending. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.